The record then, and Attorney Opper, you may provide the court with your sentencing recommendation.
Thank you, Judge. Obviously, I'm very grateful to the court for its patience in listening to all of these victims here today. It was very, very important that you hear from them directly, and the stories that they shared with you really very personal and very compelling as to the impact that this crime had on so many people on so many levels. The focus of my comments, Your Honor, will briefly speak as to Darrell Brooks and his prior history, because I think it's important there's a record of that. But I don't intend to spend a lot of time on Darrell Brooks, because I think what's already been said is the most important message that I'd like this court to think about overnight as you consider your options here. I will tell the court as to Mr. Brooks' prior record. The court is aware from the bail jumping charges he's pending on several felony counts in Milwaukee County. 21 CF 5020, he's charged with intimidation of a victim, that being Erica Patterson, and felony bail jumping with an offense date of November 8, 2021. He's pending on case number 21 CF 4596 with an offense date of November 2 of 2021. Charged there with resisting, obstructing, felony bail jumping, second degree recklessly endangering safety, domestic battery, and domestic DC. That is the case where he is alleged to have struck Erica Patterson in the face with a closed fist after an argument, and then as she was walking away, intentionally ran her over with the same 2010 Ford Escape that he used in this attack. When the police went to his mother's home and found him there, he was in the Ford. As they approached, he got out and tried to run into the house. He ignored their commands to stop. He tried to flee and eventually was apprehended. He lied to them and said he was not driving the Ford SUV that day, even though there was evidence to the contrary. That case is pending in Milwaukee County. He was released on $1,000 cash bail in that case on November 19th of 2021. There's a third file pending, 20 CF 2550. The charges are 2 counts of second degree reckless use of a weapon, felon in possession of a firearm. The date of violation is July 24, 2020. He was released on cash bail in that case in March of 21. In that case, the allegation is that he got into a fight with his nephew, and as his nephew was leaving the area, the defendant fired 1 shot from a handgun toward the vehicle that his nephew was in. The vehicle was occupied by 1 other person, and therefore he was charged with 2 counts. The next day, he was taken into custody, and a loaded Beretta 9mm handgun was located just a few feet away from him. That handgun had previously been reported stolen. I believe he has court on those files later this week in Milwaukee County, Your Honor. As far as convictions are concerned, there's a 2012 conviction from May 15th, 2012, resisting obstructing misdemeanor in Milwaukee County, sentenced to 37 days jail consecutive to any other sentence. 4/23 of 2012, there were 2 files disposed of in Milwaukee County. One of them charged misdemeanor bail jumping and possession of marijuana. He was sentenced to 180 days in the House of Correction on both counts concurrent. There was another file for felony possession of THC as a second or subsequent offense. He was also sentenced to 180 days in the House of Correction for that file.
I'm sorry, what was the conviction for?
Felony possession of THC as a second or subsequent offense.
Thank you.
On April 30, 2010, he was convicted in Wood County of strangulation/suffocation with other charges for battery and criminal damage to property dismissed and read in. There was a withheld sentence for 3 years probation. Ultimately, it was revoked in 2011, and he was sentenced to serve 11 months jail. 2009 conviction from Manitowoc County for misdemeanor obstructing, sentenced to 2 days jail, time served. 2005 conviction from Langlade County. Actually, it was a county ticket for disorderly conduct. He never paid the fine on that, so he ultimately served 30 days jail. 2003 conviction in Milwaukee County for resisting obstructing, 20 days in the House of Correction. 2002 conviction, Milwaukee County, felony possession of THC, second or subsequent offense, 50 days in the House of Correction. 2000, convicted of substantial battery, party to a crime, sentenced to prison, withheld, and 3 years probation imposed along with 6 months of condition time. That probation was ultimately revoked and he was sentenced to prison. That's his record from the state of Wisconsin. He has a record from the state of Nevada. June of 2016, he was charged with a sex offender registry violation, failed to appear in court on that offense, and there is currently an outstanding warrant for his arrest active in the state of Nevada. 2007, he pled guilty to statutory sexual seduction as a felony. A suspended sentence was ordered for 36 months probation. That's what led to the sex offender registry requirement, which he is currently non-compliant with. In December of 2006, there were 2 files disposed of in Nevada. One was domestic battery as a misdemeanor. He received a suspended sentence. And the other, he was found guilty at trial of obstructing, misdemeanor, and sentenced to jail. In the state of Georgia, he has a conviction from May of 2021. I'm sorry, not a conviction, an arrest from May of 2021 for misdemeanor battery, domestic violence. The disposition of that case is unknown. And, of course, there's paternity action that was pending here in Waukesha County that had been, a warrant or capias had been issued for him on at least 8 occasions during the life of that file. That's a 2003 case. He was sentenced to jail on several occasions for failing to pay child support. He was once allowed Huber privileges on a jail sentence, but had those Huber privileges revoked in 2009. Most recently, there was a warrant issued in August of 2021, and Judge Maxwell signed an order to lift a stay of a 120-day jail sentence. That is the extent of his criminal history that we are aware of, Your Honor. I think it's very plain on its face. He's a lifelong criminal. He is someone who has repeatedly, continuously disobeyed law enforcement based on the resisting, obstructing type charges. There's multiple counts of bail jumping, disregarding court orders, disrespecting court orders. There's multiple acts of violence. There's weapons violations. This man has a history and a pattern of engaging in violent, dangerous behavior in the community. And it was no different on November 21 of 2021. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the attack. And I choose to call it an attack instead of referring to it as the parade, as somebody mentioned. There's nothing wrong with the parade. The parade is good. The parade is the embodiment of a community. That's what you expect to see at a parade, is children at a parade, families, People from all over the area coming together for a joyful, happy event. The parade will continue. It will kick off again in a few short weeks. And I hope and pray there's joy and laughter and kids in the street collecting candy. That's what it should be. So I'm not going to refer to this case as the parade. I'm going to refer to it as what it was, an attack. And the facts are very clear, Your Honor. Very few of the victims who were struck had any idea this car was barreling down on them. It's an act of a coward, plain and simple. They had no way to know it was coming. And he mowed over them and ran them over without any ability to defend themselves. What is so offensive about this conduct, Your Honor, is obviously the violent nature of it, but even more so, the defendant's conduct and behavior in this court, his complete lack of regard for the decorum of the court, the respect of the court. And I don't mean you personally, of course you deserve that as well, but I mean for the sanctity of the court, the courtroom, the process that we as Americans respect and treasure and protect for well over 200 years, and he can't engage in the most civil behavior as being quiet when another person speaks. Many, many people came into this courtroom over the course of the trial and the proceedings. Every one of them was able to sit and obey the court's order. If you asked them to stand up, they'd stand up. If you asked them to sit down, they'd sit down. If you told them court's in session, be quiet, they all would. Everyone was able to do that except Darrell Brooks. I think he was able to do it. I just don't think he wanted to. I just think this is all part of his charade. This referring to himself in the third person, trying to distract him or detract himself, I should say, from the events, taking absolutely no responsibility. It's the act of a narcissistic coward. Those words have been used here today, and nothing could be further from the truth. He is a coward. He ran like a scared little chicken from this parade, trying to slither away in the dark of night, but only to stop long enough and try and take advantage of good citizens that would help him. He calls and lies to his mom, right? Get me an Uber. I can't get into it. He lies to the officers repeatedly. We saw the time of his arrest. We heard the testimony from Daniel Ryder, a good man with good intentions and a good heart, who took this murderer into his home and held him there long enough for the police to come and take him away without any knowledge whatsoever of what had gone on. He takes advantage of everyone. He's extremely manipulative. He absolutely thinks he's in control of everything, when in fact, as he sits here in custody, he's in control of nothing except for his own behavior.
Mr. Brooks, be quiet.
Except
I'm
for
not
his...
going to sit here and be disrespected.
Mr. Brooks, be quiet.
I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected.
These are sentencing arguments and they can make them.
So I could do the same thing?
Mr. Brooks, there's nothing disrespectful. They're doing it in
Yes,
a
it is.
respectful way.
Okay, copy out of my name again.
Go ahead, Attorney Opper.
Judge, these are the facts. You heard from so many of these parents and so many of the people that were there of that fight or flight, right, that kicked in. He ran. He fled. He tried to protect his own self. That's it. That's all he did. Everybody else sprang into action, whether that action was to immediately account for their for their family and get them out of there to safety, whether it was good Samaritans. And Judge, I really thought long and hard. I had a video clip that I was perhaps going to show to you. you've seen a lot of this during the trial, but I mean, it comes from the clip when I showed during my closing argument near the end of the parade route where the Catholic community had been struck and all the shoes laying in the road and things like that. That person that took that video walked down Main Street for quite some time and captured quite a few images, and it's really quite powerful, but I also thought it's really quite painful. But one of the things that was just so remarkable to us as we watched things like that was the average citizens that just sprung into action to save somebody else. There was a particular moment where there's a person on the ground fervently performing CPR on a victim in amongst a pool of blood without any regard for themselves whatsoever. I don't know who this person was. I don't think I'll ever know. But it's a prime example of the good that came out. So many people talked this afternoon about good versus evil, and I definitely believe that's what this case was about. Darrell Brooks is the epitome of evil. He is evil in
Another
person.
courtroom, please.
No, you may not.
The community is
Now,
good.
the order
The
of the
people
court, so
are good.
I think it'd be
The
best for me to
victims
just go
are
into the
good.
other
Mr.
courtroom.
Brooks, I'm talking.
I don't care about you talking.
I don't care what you care about.
I know you don't.
Sit down and be
You-
quiet.
Nah.
Everybody has told you that. Stop it.
See, you got it all wrong, Miss Opper.
Judge, the community has spoken. This jury returned a verdict in 2 hours. That's how open and shut this case was.
Well, actually, it was
Everybody saw it.
Actually, it was
Everybody
overnight.
but Darrell Brooks. This jury deserves to be commended for their conduct, their
God bless you,
patience,
though.
their
God bless you.
service.
Mr. Brooks,
I asked to go to the other courtroom.
I'm not
so we
sending
wouldn't
you
have-
there.
So we wouldn't have to go.
it's not, that is not a place you get to request to go to. It's
So
when you disrupt the proceedings. She's
I'm not
almost
trying to disrupt
done.
the proceedings. I'm trying to go to the other courtroom.
No.
So she can finish saying the
I wanted-
BS she gotta say.
I wanted to share something with you, Judge. This is something that came in on December 5th of 2021. An anonymous letter came, well, it's not anonymous, it's signed, but it's from a person we don't know. From another state, from the state of Kansas. December 5 of 2021, this person took time out of her day to write a card it's addressed to the Waukesha community, and it was sent to our office. And she wrote, "We have been praying for the healing of your community. Please know that there are people who care deeply all over this nation." That's the kind of message Darrell Brooks needs to hear. Because I know during the trial, there was a lot of cards, a lot of messages received in my office and in your office. Good, hardworking, decent people that respect the law, that respect human life, that respect their neighbors, that would take the time to comment and say, "Good job. We support you. We are with you." And you saw that strength behind me all day. Those young kids, children, coming up. I mean, Your Honor, I'll say this. God is good. There's been a lot of talk about God. There's been a lot of talk about religion. Darrell Brooks brought the Bible into this courtroom.
Every day.
These children are remarkable for their strength, for their healing, their physical healing. We haven't met these kids before. We've never met them. We met them today for the first time. You would never know the serious injuries that they suffered as a result of Darrell Brooks by looking at them. Of course, there's much healing to be done. But isn't it remarkable that in a year's time, look how far we have come as a community. Look how far these families have come. These families, these victims that stood up and pointed to Darrell Brooks and said, "You will not beat me. You will not knock me down." That's what we need to move forward with as a community, Your Honor. His behavior is done. We're done with him. He has forfeited his right to be in this courtroom. He's forfeited his right to be in our community, period. There is not one thing that mitigates this sentence, not one. He deserves the absolute maximum sentence on all counts consecutive. Look, Judge, you saw the videos. This wasn't him plowing in to one large group of 50 people at one point in time and hitting them. It was linear. He hit one, kept going. Hit two, kept going. Hit three, kept going. All the way down the street. That's consecutive sentences, Your Honor. That's intentional, willful, volitional conduct that warrants consecutive sentences stacked one on top of the other, just as he stacked victims up as he drove down the road in complete disregard for any other person whatsoever. We kept the kids out of the courtroom in the trial, Judge, but boy, it's impactful to listen to them today and realize this isn't just, victim GG. This is a child that you willfully ran over with a 3,000-pound vehicle, as so many people so adeptly observed. Police officers, first responders, the medical professionals. It's kind of weird, Judge, because we're coming up on the anniversary, of course, and we're coming up on the weekend before Thanksgiving, which is a weekend that a lot of people pay attention to on the calendar because here in good old Wisconsin, it's deer hunting season. It's a lot of families going out, starting their Christmas activities, Christmas festivities, Christmas shopping, whatever it is. So it's kind of that kind of a weekend that comes around every year that on its own, it's not a holiday, it's not really a known day, but we all know that first weekend before Thanksgiving and what it brings. We all look forward to maybe a short work week, spending time with family, getting together. And here it comes, and it's the anniversary of this attack at the hands of Darrell Brooks. But we're going to have an ability to move on from that. We have the ability, we have the tools as a community, Your Honor, to do that. And that's definitely because of everyone that responded to this incident, the first responders, the police officers, the medical personnel that got paged in on a Sunday night when we're all hunkered down, Packers had played, it's cold, it's dark, and they all had to spring into action and respond. And there were law enforcement from all over southeastern Wisconsin, fire department, EMTs. No one paused, no one hesitated for a second. They just came and helped. And I think that's something that our families, our community can build on as well, Your Honor, to say evil is easily overcome here. Darrell Brooks deserved to be locked up for the rest of his life. He cannot be trusted ever, ever again. I ask you to consider, I'm not going to go into it, but we had filed the other act's evidence, some of the language in that other act's evidence, the intimidation of the victim. It played out repeatedly in this courtroom. He tried to intimidate you. He tried to intimidate me. He tried to intimidate the witnesses. He tries and tries and tries, but he fails. He's not the strongest person in the courtroom. He's the weakest person in the courtroom. Morally bankrupt. That's what he is. His character is void. I asked Attorney Basie, what's the word I can use for low character, and then we came up with the fact he really has no character. It's one of the factors the court needs to consider. Protection of the public, the severity of the crime, they all weigh heavily in a stacked sentence, Your Honor, consecutive maximum across the board. Every one of these victims deserves that. I don't know how we look at any of these victims and say, well, he got concurrent time on your case because your pain and suffering wasn't quite as bad as the guy before you or the girl before you. They all deserve that sentence that speaks to their count. The restitution, Your Honor, I filed the paperwork. We are seeking restitution in the dollar amounts from my letter that we reviewed this morning. I'm asking under 97320 sub 11 sub F that you enter an order that the Department of Corrections shall keep 50% of any wages Mr. Brooks may earn in prison and any monies that may be paid on his books or canteen account, and direct those monies to be paid directly towards restitution. He should not be able to work or receive canteen without paying down that restitution. I also included in my letter the request that should any monies ever be paid by contract to Mr. Brooks, that he should attempt to benefit financially from these crimes, that those monies would be placed into an escrow account maintained by the Department of Justice and paid towards the restitution. The restitution in this case is ridiculously low when you consider it, and that's again because of the generosity of good people all over the world that contributed to a community fund, and other individuals who generously donated to help these families pay for funerals and medical expenses and things like that. Can you imagine when you heard these mothers describing what their children have been through? Can you imagine the medical bills on these? And he's lucky he's getting off with a $200,000 bill for restitution, Your Honor. I think he should have to pay every last penny of it. I also wanted to wrap up again, Your Honor, by saying you didn't hear from all the victims. Certainly, there were some that just cannot bring themselves to this court in any fashion, in any way. And we ask you to keep them in mind as well, especially the Bill Hospital family. Bill was, walking in support of his wife's team and trying to be in a supportive role, as he had done on many other occasions, and lost his life for that simple action, that simple act of good that he participated in. There were some groups that are not represented here today, but I know you heard their story at trial, and you're aware of what some of them went through that maybe wasn't specifically addressed here today, but I just ask you to keep in mind that we certainly presented a wide array of victims to you, but not everyone. And then certainly, as I mentioned at the outset, the community as a whole absolutely demands justice for these victims, these families, and for the community itself. That Darrell Brooks has no redeeming value, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Brooks, as far as I can tell from the correspondence from your mom and from you, I believe there may be closer to 3 individuals plus yourself